Hello, welcome. My name is Gabriel, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books I read in September and October. I'm out in the open air again, but I've got my microphone, so hopefully the audio on this one's, clear. I just thought this was, a really pretty space to film. I was driving around for hours trying to find, an empty park to film in, but none of them are empty because I just happened to pick, the most beautiful day that we've had in weeks, so everybody is outside doing something. It's also really noisy on campus right now. We just won a football game, so people are cheering and screaming. Is this lighting gonna look artsy or bad? We'll find out. I didn't read a ton in the last few months. School has been pretty busy, but I also just couldn't find the motivation to sit down and really work through something. But I'm just gonna share with you what I did get through because I found some really cool stuff. So first up, I read Citizen, an American lyric by Claudia Rankine. This is a collection of poetic essays focusing on race in America. I read a section of this in school a little over a year ago, and the writing is just electric, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. So I was really excited when I found a copy of it a few weeks ago. The writing is really beautiful and electric, but it's also got an immediacy to it and an urgency. It's really deeply personal and emotional. What makes the text so unique, though, is that Rankine tells the story in the second person, so all of the events she's describing are happening to you. This book gives readers a really clear sense of what it is like to live Rankine's life as a black woman in America. You experience all of her frustration and her anger and her sorrow firsthand. It is unlike anything I've ever read. I think that this is a must-read for everybody, not only because it helps you understand modern racial injustice in a really clear and personal way, but also because it is just a source of really incredible writing. Her words are devastating, but they are also healing and hopeful, and it is something that I think all of us need right now. I gave this 5 stars, and I plan to read every word Claudia Rankine has ever written. Sorry, there are people walking by, so I'm being awkward. I need a haircut, but I've been avoiding it, and I think I will avoid it for a few weeks longer, because why spend $15 on a haircut when I could buy a book? Next up, I read If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. This book is about Tish, a young woman who finds out she is pregnant shortly after her boyfriend Fonnie is imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit. The book follows their love story as well as the events of Fonnie's legal trial, and I adored this. It is a really lovingly crafted look at a couple and a family and a community. I read this in what felt like one breath, almost 2 months ago now, so a lot of the details are pretty fuzzy in my brain, but I remember how much I loved the clear and clever writing. This book also felt a lot more hopeful than Giovanni's Room. Giovanni's Room is the only other piece of Baldwin's writing that I've read, and so I went into this expecting it to be as cynical as that one, so I left it feeling more hopeful. I gave this 5 stars when I first finished it, although it hasn't stuck with me as much as I thought it would. I need to watch the movie still, and maybe that will help refresh my memory. Next, I read Angels in America, a gay fantasia on national themes by Toni Kushner. I'm going to count this as 2 books because it's 2 plays. You have Millennium Approaches and Perestroika. I've considered this to be my favorite play since I first read it about 2 years ago, but after this most recent reread, I think this is probably my favorite piece of writing in existence. So, Angels in America follows an eclectic cast of characters living in New York City at the height of the AIDS crisis. It is a fascinating exploration of American politics and gay life and Judaism and Mormonism and plague and destiny. The first time I read this play, I really focused on its idea that there are no angels in America and that we are living in a country with no faith intrinsically or inseparably tied to the land that we are living on, or at least there's no spirituality infused in America as a settler colonial state. And so to me, it was really about how instead of faith, Americans have politics. And so Americans' idea of religion is inseparable from the American myth and these government institutions that we have built. So this time around, as I was reading it, all of that was running through my head, but my read this time was a lot more informed by current events. You know, there are some pretty insane parallels between the events described in the play and what's happening today. We are also currently in the midst of a plague, languishing under a dangerously incompetent presidential administration with no regard for human life. experiencing massive anxiety about looming global catastrophe. In fact, I would say that all of the anxieties of the 80s that Toni Kushner was describing are, in a lot of ways, more intense now. And I was much more interested in the play's question of what do you do when the world, or at least life as you know it, is ending? The other day I was listening to a podcast that my friend Bella sent to me, which said that this play is about answering the question, what do you do when God has abandoned you? Because in this play, God was real, and he was here, and he was influencing the course of human history, and then one day he just left. So what do you do when there's nobody there with a vision, nobody to guide you, and nobody to bend the moral arc of the universe onward and upward? That is a question I think that we all have right now in one form or another, and this play answers, you keep living anyway. This play is always 5 stars. It is the greatest thing I have ever read. It will probably be the greatest thing you've ever read. Next, I read another play. I read a lot of plays during the school year just because they're easier to get through. So, I read Almost Maine by John Cariani. This is a collection of scenes, each between a different pair of characters, and all of the characters are in some way grappling with love, loss, or rejection. I thought it was fine. It's really short and sweet. There's a strange tone to it, though, because a lot of the scenes read as a farce, and there are some magical realism elements which make it seem like this is a very heightened kind of reality, but then some scenes seem to be played entirely straight, and I just can't really get a grip on what the vibe is supposed to be. I gave this 3 stars. It's fun. You're probably going to get dragged along to a high school production of it someday. Then I tried to read The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. I won't talk too long about this one because despite my best efforts, I didn't finish it. I quit at about page 410. This book is about a young girl who sets out to solve her brother's murder. I made a whole reading vlog following me throughout the whole process, so if you want to get my entire experience of reading this book, I encourage you to check that out. But to sum it up, I didn't like this book because I felt like the prose was cumbersome, the plot was dragging, I was ambivalent about the characters, and there were some confused racial politics which weren't dealt with in the way that I would have liked, and I felt like they left the reader in a really uncomfortable, unproductive place. I struggled through it for about 3 weeks, but eventually I just gave up. After that, I read Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis. It is a historical account of the women's rights and black liberation movements from their inception up until the present day, and it lays out the needs that the movements have going forward. I thought that this was excellent. It's very clear and easy to follow, and the history is really interesting to learn about. I've always been really interested in the relationship between the early women's suffrage movement and the abolitionists because it was a really tense, uncomfortable allyship, and this book lays it all out in a really fascinating way. The class analysis that Davis brings to this book is also really fascinating because she points out how capitalism has strengthened institutions of oppression because it is profitable, and that true liberation is going to come with the total abolition of capitalism. You know, just girly things. I didn't give this a rating because I don't rate things that I read for educational purposes, but I definitely recommend it to everyone. After that, I read Ariel by Sylvia Plath. This is the final collection of poetry that Sylvia Plath published after her death. I read the revised edition, which included the poems in the order that Plath wrote them, and it also included some poems which were not included in the first edition. I'm not great with poetry. Some of these I understood, and a lot of them I didn't. Even if I didn't comprehend a lot of it, the writing is still beautiful, and there were a lot of poems in here that I really enjoyed. In fact, 2 of them that I absolutely loved, Tulips and The Arrival of the Bee Box, are now 2 of my favorite poems ever. I love Sylvia Plath. I'm quickly running out of new writing of hers to read, but I still have a collection of short stories and essays to get through, and I'm very excited about that. I didn't give this a rating, but it's great. And finally, I read Paradise by Toni Morrison. This book is about a town in Oklahoma populated entirely by dark-skinned black people, as well as a nearby convent, which serves as kind of a halfway house for a group of wayward women. The book follows dozens of characters, and it is not in chronological order, and it spans decades from the formation of the town all the way up until the present day, where tension between the convent and the town results in an act of violence. This book, like most of Toni Morrison's, is pretty difficult to follow, but that's okay because for this book especially, I don't think that keeping track of every individual character is really necessary, so long as you are able to get a general sense of this town and these people and what's important to them. In Toni Morrison books in general, I don't really think that you need to understand everything to understand their power. And in fact, I think it's incredible how her books encourage you to do the extra work, to dig deeper, because with her writing, there is always something new to unlock. I give her a pass on a lot of things that bug me from other writers. You know, if anyone else wrote a book that was like impossible to follow with characters that I didn't remember, I would be angry. I would be so mad. But her writing is just unmatched. I don't read her books for the characters or for the plots. I read her books because every time she picked up a pen, she reinvented the English language. Her books are less about story. Well, that's not fair. But to me, her books are less about the actual story so much as they are just a vessel for some of the greatest prose in human history. Sometimes I do get lost in her books, and there's just absolutely no reading comprehension, just immaculate vibes. She's a genius, what can I say? Okay, anyways, back to Paradise. This was cool. Once you are invested in the plot, it's really exciting, and as tensions build, it gets like really intense and really emotional. It's also kind of about like self-segregation. In an interview, Toni Morrison said that this book is an interrogation of the very idea of paradise, because in her experience, paradise is the most defining feature of heaven is that there's a lot of people who can't get in. And she wanted to write about what happens to people when your entire life is based on exclusion. But she also really explores this idea of like safe spaces and how much mistrust grows among outsiders when a group of people are just living their lives away from the supervision of their oppressors. I haven't really sat with this one long enough to really clarify everything I'm feeling about it, but it's incredible. I gave it 4 stars, but like all of her books, I do plan to reread it very soon. Actually, a fun fact about this book is that in Toni Morrison's house, in her bathroom, across from the toilet, you would see a letter hanging from a prison in Texas that informed her that Paradise had been banned because they were afraid it would incite a riot. And she framed that letter and kept it until the day she died because she thought it was one of the greatest compliments she had ever received on her writing. So yeah, if you want a book that carries that much power, Paradise is it. And that's it. I didn't read a ton, but I really enjoyed a lot of what I did read. I have a lot of really cool books that I'm reading this month and next month that I cannot wait to tell you guys about. So be sure that you subscribe and you hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever those videos come up. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and comment down below what you have been reading lately, and also give your thoughts on any of these books. Stay sane, stay healthy. I'll see you guys next time.